every person that's been majorly persecuted in their entire life has only been persecuted for the cause of truth. Because people who don't fight for truth, they'll eventually buckle. They'll be bought. They'll be corrupted. Always. Always. That's a peasant's perspective. Don't fool yourself into thinking that I said something that got me kicked off platform. Don't fool yourself into thinking that one of Ron's little swear words that he slips out occasionally got us kicked off, okay? It wasn't it. It wasn't using other people's contents and playing videos from news sources or anything like that. It wasn't that at all. It was who we are and what we stand for. Somehow, either an algorithm or a person said, this assembly, this podcast can't be spread, cannot be shared. So the only way to overcome that is democratically. It's on you, the listeners, to share this podcast. You do what Thomas Paine did. He circulated common sense and people circulated it. That's the only way this works. This podcast is the new common sense and other podcasts like it, not just me. Good morning, peasants. All right, so that opening, we've been having issues with our opening.
If you think what happened in California.
I don't care about fires in California. We've been having issues with our opening because on my way back from Missouri, where I was in prison, the computer that had all that information on it got broken. And so I was never able to retrieve those files. And so we had to kind of cut and snip it. But anyways, that opening right there came from an old promo video that one of our listeners did for us. So I was kind of looking at some of that old stuff. I was like, oh, we'll just play that for the opening. But anyways, all right. So we're going to jump right in today as we slowly get our stride on this show. Yesterday, I was like, how did I make it flow right? Oh, yeah. So got that tactic today. So to start out, there's kind of like, I took a break from the news just simply because, I came home from prison and I wanted to not watch the news constantly. But you can't help but pay attention to things. And so as we're as I'm jumping back in, I'm letting you guys jump back in with me, and we're going to get familiar with some of these big themes. Because what I'm seeing is I'm starting to see kind of Act 3 of what has been a very long, drawn-out play that's been happening.
Is it a tragedy?
Well, let's hope not.
Okay.
Let's hope not. But we definitely have this kind of bigger narrative, and we're starting to see a lot of the strings connect. And one of the things that's really interesting about doing the show now as before, remember how, we joked one time, I thought this was a conspiracy. I was like, you were like, this is a conspiracy show. And I'm like, you thought this was a conspiracy show? And here we are 5 years later, and it's like, see, look, we're finally getting to the resolution of some of these storylines. These were not conspiracies. We were just 5 years ahead of it. And, so it's kind of funny coming through it now, and also just with the J6 thing, having such a connection with the swamp. I mean, I was a victim of the swamp. There's no real other way to put it.
I'll also say that the last 5 years, we've been ahead of the game. Okay, great. It's also extreme anxiety inducing. Oh my gosh.
We don't know how it ends up.
Yeah. Well, you don't know how it ends up, but you're in the middle of it. And you're just like, who can I shout to what I know? And nobody, you can't talk to anybody.
When you read the book Big Brother, or 1984, and you think about Big Brother, it's like, you might not be able to talk to anybody.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because in that book, the bad guys win. Orwell was kind of like that. The bad guys kind of always end up winning. So the bad guys take that as an instruction manual rather than a warning. All right, so this comes from one of my dear friends I've had for a long time. I probably won't mention his name here, but he wrote this, and he dealt with grant writing and things like that out of DC. So he said, he wrote me this message, and I think it's great context for us. So this is some insider knowledge. I thought I would share this with you, some personal insight I have into how the federal government handles grants, and I've had training in DC on how to do this. So for what it's worth, the federal agencies only tend to monitor direct grantees. They require direct grantees to monitor their sub-recipients, and you have to send reports that show that your allocations to these sub-recipients are allowable, but it pretty much ends there. 2, sub-recipients can allocate costs to other sub-recipients as well. As long as they qualify those costs as allowable to the direct grantor, it ends there. 3, as you can see, if you have several nested sub-awards going to sub-recipients, it would be easy to hide and gift and find ways to route money in ways not intended by the grantor. 4, Congress tends to give broad directives to agencies. Agencies then take these bills, often omnibus type bills, and develop allowability guidelines for spending based on the legislation. So notice how it says agencies. So this is, we were talking yesterday off air about Loper Bright and how agencies can no longer rule make. And that includes things like spending directives, right? It has to come from Congress now. So that's why some of this dismantling, it's like it's not going to be so easy just to put back together, because an agency just can't start rulemaking again based on the Loper Bright decision. Okay, so finally, their inspector generals, typically accountant types, confirm the allowability through allowability benchmarks, but must be defined in reporting. For a subrecipient, typically you only have to say you have monitored them and that they are spending the money according to the guidelines. Seeing an LLC that has a charity-oriented name typically stops the digging for information. 5, agencies can typically charge 10% de minimis for administrative costs, or they can define their administrative costs and submit them for reimbursement. This often goes upwards of 40%. It's expensive to monitor all the way to the bottom. As you can see, it would be super easy to grift this system. The algorithms that Musk's teams are employing are chasing the money trail through each nested subrecipient to come up with some evidence that appears to be some sort of laundering for nefarious purposes. Honestly, this technology should change how federal funds are monitored. Right now, recipient agencies must make onerous reports when the tech can do it on its own 1,000 times better, and to see the entire downstream effects. The agency should simply be focused on spending the money according to allowable guidelines, knowing that if they don't spend it right, they're going to be exposed. Also, Congress should be less broad, dictating more specifically in allowability. Right now, the legislation will say something like, spend $2 million in housing rehabilitation in California. The agency must then determine what is allowable within the broad framework, and then it audits itself through the IGs. Wrong. Another agency should be auditing them. Perhaps all IGs should be rolled up under Treasury. Any judge not allowing a read-only audit of this process is simply corrupt. I don't know how else to put it. Disallowing spending is another matter. If the law says you must spend $2 million in California housing rehabilitation, then you have to do that. However, instead of making it a fussy 15-step program with nested NGOs, you could make it a block grant, which requires less people to manage, and cut out all of the subrecipients who are all taking their administrative cut. At least this way, more of the money goes back into American pockets. You can report this if you want on your program, up to you. So it's a good little breakdown of basically what happens is you have like a bigger NGO that then gets the money, who then gives it to a smaller foundation or charity, who then might even give it to another charity. So all along the way there is someone just has to have a charity that has a good sounding name, and they can funnel a bunch of money in there, which is where you get all these headlines about, we're funding some gender study of marmots in Pakistan. And it's like, well, they're a charity and they're getting this some funnel of money. Are they even studying marmots in Pakistan?
Probably not. It's probably only 5% of the original spending package anyways, and who knows where the other 95% went.
Exactly. They have a 90% management fee. Interesting.
No, I mean, even if they were legit only taking their 10%, they could be a sub consultant that's getting a small slice of whatever was handed out, and then 90% of it was going to other entities that were using it however they wanted.
We have no idea.
Yeah.
So yesterday we kind of touched on this theme with Anna Paulina Luna now being in charge of all these wrapping up conspiracy theories, everything from UFOs to JFK to 9/11 and what was the Epstein list, right? Yeah. So we're like, oh, okay, so we're going to have aliens and pedophiles now in the same committee. You know what I mean? Like, this is awesome.
Well, and it also makes it a nice package in case they want to just throw under the bus someday, yes?
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah.
Okay? So I am ultimately, as a peasant, we're selfish, right? I don't care if you're right or left. I care if you're dipping into my bank account. Okay. Like, you're not going to talk me into doing something for someone else that there's no accountability, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't care if it's for the social good, or if it's for the race's good, or it's for the tribe's good. I don't care. Right. Like, sell me on it. Don't just take it from me. And so that's like politics has kind of been this Hegelian dialectic of, we're going to help you. Oh, no, we're going to help you. No, we're going to help you fix the problem they caused. Okay, we're going to help you fix the problem they caused, back and forth all the time. So when we're talking about government accountability and spending, like, come on, man. Like Rush Limbaugh, we're paying in cash, right? I mean, they've been saying it forever, right? Like, it's not like this new problem. Hey, the government's bloated. No, Sherlock. You know what I mean? You should write a novel about it. You know, it's like, all right. So listen to Bill Clinton, Al Gore. I mean, they've been at this for a while.
The report tells us how to cut waste, cut red tape, streamline the bureaucracy, change procurement rules, change the personnel rules, and create a government that works better and costs less.
I'll go for president.
Where it says the president should, the president will.
Among the 800 recommendations, eliminating 12% of the federal workforce, merging some government agencies like the FBI, the DEA, and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, closing
97.
hundreds of government offices outside Washington.
From the day I took office, one of the commitments that I made to the American people was that we would do a better job here in Washington in rooting out wasteful spending. We thought that it was entirely
He's got the best
appropriate
lip service ever.
our governments and our agencies.
So I did an interview for NPR, and they were asking about my political affiliation or orientation or whatever. And I was like, look, I voted for Barack Obama,
Yeah.
right? But he would say all the right things, and every paper he signed was the opposite. And this is a classic example of that. He said the right things, Mr. Hope and Change, like he ran on a populist agenda, but everything he did was globalist oriented. Everything.
To try to root out waste, large and small, in a systematic way. It means cutting some programs that I think are worthy, but we may not be able to afford right now. A lot of the action is in Congress, legislative, but in the meantime, we don't need to wait for Congress in order to do something about wasteful spending that's out there. We haven't seen as much action out of Congress as we'd like, and that's why we launched on our own initiative the campaign Cut Waste. And we're going to keep on finding every possible way that we can do that, even if Congress is not active. There you go.
Trump and Elon are like, hold my beer.
Hold my beer, exactly. Hold my beer. In fact, let's hear what Trump has to say about this. So one of the things we have to see as peasants is the constant dueling narratives. Right?
Yes.
Like we really we are inundated with propaganda. Everything, like every investigative, we're going to hear about more of this later on, but everything is propaganda. We just have to assume it at this point.
Yeah.
Like the only thing that's not propaganda is this show. So make sure you share it with your friends. Okay.
Yeah.
But everything is propaganda to one degree or another. And in an environment where we're only as good as the information we have, we then have to now become experts at reading the propaganda. What is it that they're really trying to say? What's the real message that's there? So the only way you can do that is by kind of absorbing as much information as you can, distilling it down, synthesizing it, and then coming up with your own opinion. And as long as you have a developed, informed opinion, we can definitely agree to disagree. Where we run into issues is when your opinion is not formed or based in anything, right? It's just based off, I saw a meme and it sounded good,
right.
And that's just, Marxism relies, in my opinion, a lot on just sound bites,
Yeah.
All right, so here's Donald Trump talking about what Doge has started to find. And you're going to notice there's an escalating tension around all of this, and we're going to walk through why that is.
Can have that kind of fraud. You're talking about are you talking about what? Wait. Which are you talking? You're talking about with regard to all of the investigations that are going on about this stupidity. What we're going to do is tomorrow I'm having a news conference. I'm going to read to you some of the names that hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars have been given to. And if you tell me that we should be giving money to those things, those entities, I think you'll probably have to leave as a reporter because you're not very talented. When you look at the kind of money, billions and billions of dollars being thrown away illegally, and there's no chance. I mean, I say it in front of our attorney general. There's no chance that there's not kickbacks or something going on. When you give millions and millions of dollars to somebody that stands to look at something for 15 minutes and walks away with millions of dollars, that money's coming back in some form. And that's only one form of corruption. The biggest thing is what they do to our country. They're taking massive amounts of money and spending it on items. I went through a list of 200 expenditures that were made. And I found 3 that looked like they were reasonable. Okay, 3. And we'll be talking about that tomorrow. We have a lot of stuff. And I want to commend Elon because he's done a fantastic. He doesn't need this. You know, he's abused by you people every day. He's found more things than anybody could find. I think he's got the credibility to do it. I know he does. And it's his group of people. You know, they started off with 12. I call them 12 geniuses. They started off with 12, and they went to 20 and 25, and now they're up to almost 100. People are joining to help them because there's a massive fraud that's taken place.
Go ahead.
That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Are you going to play any Mike Benz clips?
Not today.
Well, he was on Joe Rogan. He talked all about NGOs for 3 hours.
Oh, yeah.
So I'd encourage anybody to go listen to that.
Yeah. So, okay, so now let's read the narrative a little bit. So this right here is CNN, and this is Sean Jennings. So Sean Jennings is like the Republican on all the CNN panels, and he's the guy that just gets there and like says the most obvious things, and everybody's like, "Oh, what do you mean there's only 2 genders?" He's like, because you know you know what I mean, like like he's like the obvious, like Trump ran on downsizing government and cutting spending. I know, but is this what the voter really voted for? Yes, he said it nonstop for hours and hours at a time in front of tens of thousands and millions of people. Well, but Elon Musk is like, no, they actually did kind of vote for Elon Musk, like the Doge thing. This was a package; it was announced. You know what I mean? Like. These are not new concepts to us. Like, I can understand feeling a little blindsided with Greenland and 51st state Canada. Like, I get that. That kind of came out after the election. But the Doge stuff and the cutting spending, I mean, come on. People voted for Clinton because he's finally going to get to the bottom of it. People voted for Al Gore and then Bush because they were finally going to get to the bottom of it. And Obama. And so it's like, oh, hey, now that someone's actually come in and done something other than just hire another top bureaucrat to do it, right? Then that's where you're all of a sudden, it's like, oh, they've got information. So listen to the tone in this CNN reporter. I don't even know her name. Boldane, whatever. Anyways, listen to the tone in her voice talking to Scott Jennings about what seems kind of like obvious.
What did you think of that press conference, Scott?
Well, look, Elon Musk, who doesn't need to do this, has... You know, he could be doing anything else. He's got companies. He's the richest guy in the world. Has decided to give his own time to a government of a country that he loves, that has given him all this opportunity. I take him at his word that he wants to be transparent, that he invites transparency. Obviously, everybody in the English-speaking world media is looking into him every single day. I would have no fear if I were him about Congress asking questions and looking into it. I think they are.
The definition of it is he's not been on the front end of this so far. He's not been transparent. I mean, there may be
they are making routine announcements about the things they are finding, and they are inviting questions about the things they are finding every single day.
But by definition, he's not being transparent. They're not. They're not providing data for the things that they say they have found evidence of. They just aren't.
The White House has provided.
You can make announcements, and he also did admit that he actually.
So you just don't believe it. I mean, they are providing information. You just choose not to believe that it's true.
I don't think anyone should just believe that it's true. Do you think that people have taken kickbacks of tens of millions of dollars from USAID?
Here's what I think.
Do you believe that?
I think every year.
No, but don't accuse me of just like.
I'm just.
Okay, so this is. What, do you think people are just getting kickbacks? Prove it, right? It's like, yeah, I do. Do you not think the government has some corruption? Well, that's not what I'm talking about. It's like, well, I am. You know what I mean? It's like, well, who are these people? It's like, well, we named one, Politico, Reuters, probably CNN. Well, but these aren't kickbacks. It's like, how do you think your salary is paid? Clearly, it's not ratings. You know what I mean? Okay, here we go.
Just asking you, do you believe that there is any level of fraud, waste, fraud, abuse in the government?
No, that's not what you're asking me, and I'm going to ask the question. Don't accuse me of just like.
And so, if you believe that, do you believe that it's possible that they are finding and producing information about it? Of course,
that wasn't my question. The question was, by definition, they're not being transparent. They can continue to be successful.
What do you want them to do?
That was your statement.
Yeah,
provide
it's not
data.
even a question.
If they're provide data that they have found people, everyone would want to know if someone has received kickbacks to the tune of tens of millions of dollars.
I don't disagree with you. I love the idea of data. I love the announcements. I love them putting out.
How much of a kickback is okay, by the way?
I don't know.
Is it under a 10,000 threshold? Is it like a good old $600 you don't have to report it on your taxes? Like how much of a kickback is okay?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're going to face a felony someday, better just make it big.
I mean, don't go broke over a duplex. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
go big. You know what I'm saying? Get into the hotel business if you're going to go broke. At the end of the day, it's the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like, be worthy of it. Okay, be worthy of it.
We like bees.
I find
Billions.
it really interesting. They're like, well, is there tens of millions? It's like, listen, if it's fraud, $500 at a time, that adds up to that. Like, don't degrade the fact that it's a $500 fraud. Like, $1 of fraud is $1 of fraud.
Right.
Like, this is the thing that used to drive me crazy in prison, because I'm like, you guys are criminals. Well, we're not criminals. You know, this whole system's messed up. I'm like, yeah, but listen, I'm like, certain things are just wrong. For example, I believe stealing is wrong. It doesn't matter who you're stealing from. Stealing is wrong. And they'd be like, well, it's just not okay to steal from other inmates, but you can steal from the institution or from the guards. And it's like, okay, so for you, stealing is okay. It's just wrong who you steal from. Does that make sense?
So if you take a kickback, I mean, you got to put that money somewhere. Do you know what the threshold amount is for getting your transaction flagged if you make a deposit in your bank account?
It's $10,000.
Not anymore.
What is it now?
$600.
Okay, because that's the report limit. So again, this all kind of goes into this category of that they're like, you know, well, how many apartments is it okay for Trindagua to take over in Colorado? You know, it's just a couple.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. In the United States, it's okay. Yeah, it's like, unless you take over 20 full buildings, we're kind of just let you do your zone, your chop, right? It's crazy.
Well, even if it is 10,000, you know, for a transaction, is that the limit?
Does it matter? I mean, at my point, I'm questioning the existence of the tools in general.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's finish this little clip here.
They have not.
And I love the idea of Congress also bringing them up to report to Congress on what they're finding, because ultimately Congress needs to be engaged in this as well. I have no problem with that, and I don't think they do either, and that's what I heard in his press conference yesterday.
Okay.
So we've got an unbelievable amount of transparency and a media that doesn't believe they're being transparent. And here's where I think we get to the gist of it. So Maxine Waters, right? We all know Auntie Maxine, okay? She's one of the worst members of Congress. She just looks corrupt, okay? And she doesn't come across as highly intelligent. So in this particular hearing, she is talking with the Federal Reserve chairman, and she's talking about Doge getting access to the Treasury, and are they going to come to the Federal Reserve? But, okay, keep in mind knowing what time it is, right? Like this phrase, knowing what time it is, like where we're at in the narrative, at the fork in the road, you know, which direction we're heading as a country. So for years, between the Assange leaks, the Snowden leaks, we know our government spies on us. And now we're finally getting to Act 3 because we're starting to see how it is they do it, not just how they do it and through what agencies, but how those agencies are funding and how we've literally loaded the gun that's pointed at ourselves. But now you've got someone like Maxine Waters who hasn't had a problem with this at all, right? She's taken up for the state and the government and the monopoly on telling you how to live your life, right? I mean, she's absolutely for it. But here, all of a sudden, there's like a little bit of accountability, a little bit of sunlight. On one hand, they're trying to say, hey, you're not being accountable. But on the other hand, they're like, but you're also holding us too accountable. And are there real crimes, or are you just kind of embarrassing Politico for taking the money? Is that a crime? Do you see what I'm saying? Are you just trying to embarrass the New York Times? Like, what is it that they have on us, right? Do you see what I'm saying? Is this just kind of like show everybody's going to show their cards, or are you going to actually dig deep? So listen to the panic in her voice as she's asking the Federal Reserve Chair if he's going to allow Doge into the Federal Reserve, because what they're finding is all these buckets of money, right?
People of this country are being violated because all of our privacy is being taken up by Elon Musk and Trump, and we don't know what all they have on us. We don't know what all they have on us. This country.
Okay, so in context, I don't want to, apply what's not there, but she's talking about how Musk and Doge are getting all these transactions and private information. Look, this information exists. The government's got it. There's leaks all the time. We're hearing every other week that China hacked the Treasury. Like, listen, we don't live in a world of privacy.
Why would she be worried about it?
Exactly. Like, you weren't worried about it when it was American citizens. You weren't worried about it when it was Donald Trump being spied on. You've never really shown a ton of concern about information being dumped. You bragged openly about how Facebook was creating algorithms to help the Democrats win elections because we know everything, quote, end quote.
And,
right?
and also, who is us?
Yeah, exactly. So now here we have her in a panic about finding where this money's going.
Are being violated because all of our privacy is being taken up by Elon Musk and Trump, and we don't know what all they have on us.
So we don't know what all they have on us. Tell us, what are the crimes? Who are the victims that you're going to take on this
and
one?
What privacy is she talking about?
Okay, when
her privacy is being violated?
Well, but in the guise of all of Americans, but you were not concerned about
my
this
privacy
6 months ago. Yeah, she was not concerned about our privacy 6 months ago at all.
No.
But all of a sudden it's like our privacy. Whose? The NGOs, the money grifters, like people in your camp, your nephews, cousins, aunts, you know what I mean? Like, what?
Yeah.
So you're seeing, I remember when we were waiting for pardons, and it was like, am I on the list? What, tell us who's getting it or not? We were like panicking all the time. And I see the same thing here. She's like, we don't know what they have on us. Like, we don't know what to fight. Do we fight this legal? Do we fight this personal? Do we fight it in the court of public opinion? Do we fight it in the courts? Because they don't just want to like take every piece of doo-doo that comes out on them and then be like, this doo-doo's a lie, because they've figured out that every time they point out the doo-doo, people see the doo-doo. It's kind of like in the campaign, Trump's like, they're eating the pets, they're eating the cats, the dogs, and everybody's like, what? And then they find out, oh, hey, they are eating the pets. Who? The 40,000 Haitian immigrants in that little town. Wait, hold on, there's 40,000 immigrants in a little town? Yeah, but they're not eating the pets. Donald Trump's a liar. They're not eating the pets. Hold on a sec. So there's 40,000 immigrants. How big's the town? Oh, town's only got about 20,000 people in it. Okay, so there's a Midwestern town in Ohio with 20,000 people, but there's 40,000 Haitian migrants in the town. Yeah, but they're not eating the pets.
What are they eating?
I want to get this story straight. But there's 40,000 Haitian migrants in this town. Yes.
Okay. Oh, wait.
But they're not eating the pets. And it's like, media, you're so stupid. You're so focused on the pets. All America here is 40,000 people in a tiny town.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just the same thing. You don't want to bring up what they have on you because then you're bringing attention to it. So, like, the desperation in her voice. We don't know what they have on us. And so you remember what Steve Bannon said, you have these competing factions. These are two gangs that do not like each other, right? And they have mafia families. Like, you've got Donald and, Nancy Pelosi or whoever's running the other side, and they're vying for some serious control. This administration has come in with this attitude of it's not going to be business as usual. We're not going to appoint a bunch of swamp creatures. We're coming in. We're changing things. You guys don't have the law on your side. You guys don't have the Supreme Court on your side with the overturning of the Chevron deference case. Like, we're going to gut this thing. And then it's going to, this is like Franklin Roosevelt winning at the start of the Great Depression. He set the stage for the next 100 years. Right? This is what this is now. This is setting the stage for the next 100 years. Here's Karen Levitt, bringing some of the receipts as to what Doge has been accomplishing. And remember, these numbers add up. And when she's doing like a press conference like this and she brings a handful of receipts, there's probably 10,000 other receipts just like it. Right. So that the fraud and the issue is so big, it's almost too big to report on. It's that, one fraud is a huge deal. A million frauds is just a statistic.
Well, there's 1.5 million NGOs. I mean, she couldn't just stand there and even count to 1.5 million. Yeah. So there's no way you could even talk about all the stuff you found. So this is just a sample.
This is just a sample. But remember, take this sample size, take those numbers and times it by what? 100,000, a million, right? How many of these instances are we sending a small $1 million amount to some ridiculous?
And also ask yourself, how is this not transparency?
Yes.
Play.
Maybe.
The Oval yesterday gave us some information on that. We're just wondering if there's some proof, evidence. Is the White House willing to share evidence of those fraud claims, or can Elon Musk come to the briefing room and share material evidence of what he's talking about?
Sure. I would love for Elon Musk to come to the briefing room. That's why we had him go to the Oval Office yesterday, where I think he provided great answers. He was speaking in layman's terms, speaking common sense to all of you in the media, but also to Americans at home. But I would say especially to all of you in the media, because I think it's a real fallacy that there's this alleged lack of transparency when it comes to Doge. President Trump and Elon Musk have been incredibly transparent on what Doge is doing. There is an X account with the Doge handle. They are tweeting out what they are doing on a daily basis. They have a website where they are posting the receipts of the contracts that they are reviewing and the payments that they have stopped from going out the door. The secretaries of our departments have stopped from going out the door. And I would also say that before it was Elon Musk making our government efficient and accountable, it was some unnamed bureaucrat that none of you knew. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world. He's also now one of the most highly scrutinized men in the world alongside President Trump because of what he's doing and the access that he is allowing. So there's great transparency. As for the actual receipts, we are happy to provide them, and I actually brought some today because all of you know I love to bring the receipts. We have contracts upon contracts that we can send and provide this information to you. Let me be very clear. We are not trying to hide anything. We have been incredibly transparent and we will continue to be. These are screenshots of contracts that Doge found across our government. This is a DEI contract, $36,000 for U.S. citizenship and immigration services. That is against the president's policies and his America First agenda. This is a $3.4 million contract, a Council for Inclusive Innovation at the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, Department of Commerce, another DEI contract that Doge identified. I can continue to go through these. Oh, I love this one. $57,000 for climate change in Sri Lanka. What is this doing to continue the interests of the American people? Absolutely nothing. These are the line items across the federal government that Doge is identifying daily. They're moving very fast. There's a lot of paper that we can show you, but we're happy to do it. This administration has been more than transparent about what Doge is doing. And here's one of their tweets that they posted about the mine. I believe this is in Pennsylvania, where the federal employee retirement system is being processed. Did anybody know this was even happening in our country before Elon Musk talked about it in the Oval Office yesterday? A lot of Americans didn't. So we are providing transparency and accessibility on a daily basis when it comes to Doge.
So you see the competing talking points?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, here's all these companies receiving fraud. Show us what you really have. Do you have my bank account yet? Have you gotten to my cousin's nonprofit? Okay.
Just hang on.
See how this is constructed. Now we're going to get out into the weeds a little bit. We're going to go to a congressional hearing, and we're going to hear different reporters who've reported on like these deep state USAID intentions, what they're doing with the money, kind of how it ties into some of these stories that we, the American people, have been subject to for the last decade. So this is Jim Jordan. This is his committee. He's got Schellenberger on this first video, and on the next one, he's got Matt Taibbi and a couple other reporters. Oops. Dead air. Sorry, guys.
You say in your testimony, PSYOP tactics being used by the U.S. and UK military against the American people. That is really scary stuff, reading that. Could you elaborate? Because I think the American people need to hear, they need to hear about this.
Yeah, we now know what happened, which is that basically after the war on terror, the United States used counterterrorism, counterinsurgency, counterpopulism tactics first in the Middle East as part of the Arab Spring uprisings, then in the Eastern Europe as part of the color revolutions, using social media to foment revolutions against places that we wanted regime change, and then using censorship in places to repress conflicting opinion in places that we were trying to stabilize. Those tactics were then turned against the American people after the populist revolutions of 2016. First, you saw Russiagate, the idea, this wild conspiracy theory that President Trump was somehow controlled through a sex blackmail operation by the Russians. But then we also saw a very elaborate effort to do exactly what they had done abroad, creating small committees of experts to decide what the truth was and demand censorship on the basis of it, But I also mentioned there's also these proactive influence operations, the most dramatic of which is the Hunter Biden laptop, severely illegal, but we also saw the mobilization of the intelligence community. And now in the latest article that we published today, we have documented that the Agency for International Development has overseen basically a takeover over the last decade and a half of independent investigative journalism in Europe and around the world.
Okay, so USAID, through their funding channels, has orchestrated a takeover of investigative journalism around the world.
Yeah, great.
So some of the biggest stories, the lithium mines in Utah, the Uyghur Muslim camps, et cetera, there's no one going to investigate them because the money has been channeled into Trump Russia and Pete with the hooker, right? And Trump quid pro quo with Ukraine, drum, article, thousands of articles, right? All the investigative journalism has been, look over here. You're in the dark room with the flashlight and you just want to look at the corner at the thing that they want to point out. No one will walk over and flip the lights on.
Well, that's why when that big ship hit the bridge, everybody was like, oh, brother, is this just another one of those things to distract us?
Yeah, which it does happen. You know what I mean?
Constantly.
Like, hey, the bridge got hit. I wonder what those contracts are looking like.
Yeah.
It's like, geez.
Through OCCRP and supposedly independent journalism organizations with an eye to basically controlling the information and controlling the major news media that do investigative journalism.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the work that you have done over the last couple Congresses on this issue.
Mr. Schellenberger, can you explain how you traced USAID funding that served as the basis for whistleblower report in 2019, which led to the impeachment of President Trump?
Sure. Well, you may remember that the so-called whistleblower.
Okay, so you're going to follow this. USAID contributed money that funded the impeachment of President Trump. Okay. We're dealing with power. We're dealing with national sovereignty. A president is elected by the people. The people are sovereign. This government fund, a government that's created by the people and is supposed to be responsive to the people, right? Both as the beneficiary of its services as well as the grantor of its existence. And that government funded an impeachment of the people's representative.
Interesting.
Now, we've been saying this now for a decade almost. This isn't new to anybody who's been reading the tea leaves, but now it's getting to the point where we're just talking about it like it's commonplace. Full stop.
Right.
Anybody who's challenging the existence of USAID, saying it should exist, and there's some quail in Lebanon that need the funding for rescue or whatever.
Idiots.
Like, no, you don't understand. You don't fund the guy committing treason under the guise that he puts Band-Aids on the scraped knees of the people he just made get on their knees and shot in the back of the head. You know what I mean? Like this is stupid, right? You don't fund two sides of a war and then pretend like you're not happy with the war. I mean, this is what USAID has been doing for a long time, and it's crept into our daily lives, the news we consume, right? The information we have, in my case, prison time. All of this stuff starts to connect through this intricate web of money.
In the White House was actually a CIA analyst, and in that whistleblower's complaint, which led to the impeachment, one of the central pieces of evidence was created by a USAID funded and controlled organization called the OCCRP. And we have another piece out today about how it participated in the Russiagate hoax as well, creating essentially very important information leading to that. So, I mean, you have in USAID a much larger fund of money and a much broader strategy for information control that included censorship, but also, as I mentioned, taking control of investigative journalism really worldwide. I mean, its ambitions were, amazing. So, yeah, I mean, that's an agency. When we saw that get shut down by DOJ, I thought that was completely appropriate. If there's something in there that it was doing that's valuable, then you could refund it later. But my view, same thing with CISA, death penalty for organizations that participated in violations of the First Amendment like CISA. Cybersecurity is an extremely important function. It shouldn't be contaminated and undermined by censorship activities.
Well, I think it's always been known that our government has funded the change in administrations, if we can say it politely, of other governments. But isn't it borderline treason when the taxpayer when organizations entrusted with protecting our country are now undermining our own government?
Borderline.
Not borderline. No.
Like,
it's
I mean,
not
I don't
borderline.
know if you actually crossed the line to the fence.
Yeah, everybody wants to skirt around this topic.
My understanding is in court of law is if you put your hands on the fence, you have crossed the border.
Right.
And the fence is a firearm. So, like, when you say borderline treason, I'm like, I feel like it was treason.
Yeah. And everybody wants to talk about this. Nobody really wants to talk about this. They always want to skirt around it because it's ugly. But when you start talking about treason, and even Schellenberger was like, what was the phrase he used? It's
the phrase he used?
Yeah, he said it's the corporations are. He just said it. Can you play it again?
Yeah.
No. Don't go all the way back.
Oh, okay.
Just like a 30
when
seconds.
the taxpayer when organizations entrusted with
extremely important function, it shouldn't be
Right here.
contaminated and undermined by censorship activities.
Well, I think it's always been known that our government has.
But that was completely appropriate. If there's something in there that it was doing that's valuable, and you saw that get shut down by Doge, amazing. I mean, that's a.
So bitch.
All right. Well, anyways, so let's.
No, this is important. You got to play the whole thing again if we have to.
Whoever was in the White House was actually a CIA analyst. And in that whistleblower's complaint, which led to the impeachment, one of the central pieces of evidence was created by a USAID funded and controlled organization called the OCCRP. And we have another piece out today about how it participated in the Russiagate hoax as well, creating essentially very important information leading to that. So, I mean, you have in USAID a much larger fund of money and a much broader strategy for information control that included censorship, but also, as I mentioned, taking control of investigative journalism really worldwide. I mean, its ambitions were, amazing. So, yeah, I mean, that's an agency when we saw that get shut down by Doge, I thought that was completely appropriate. If there's something in there that it was doing that's valuable, then you could refund it later. But my view, same thing with CISA, death penalty for organizations that participated in violations of the First Amendment.
If we can say it.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to say. That's the thing that nobody wants to talk about is what should be the ramifications for being committing treason or for funding these entities or being involved in this. So, what should be.
The shell has been broken here. Okay, the bubble's been popped. Enrique Ontario got 22 years for seditious conspiracy around J6. He wasn't at D.C. on J6. He was up in Baltimore in a hotel room, okay, because he wasn't allowed to be in D.C. because of 2 days before he got in trouble. Great. But because of text messages, because of the organization that he was in, he got 22 years for seditious conspiracy. Now, I don't know about you, but when you get like a deck of playing cards and it has that little thing that says like the best hand, it's a royal flush, and then it works backwards to 2 pair or 1 pair. Well, I'm pretty sure seditious conspiracy is like the 4 of a kind to the royal flush of treason. You know what I mean? Like if you get 22 years for seditious conspiracy, then treason should be like life, right? And where do you draw the line between just sedition and conspiracy or treason, or conspiracy to commit treason, right? Like how organized are these people?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because they're gonna want you to believe that this was all just happenstance. Everybody was just doing their job, and I didn't know that my little research project about Trump and Russia was going to end up in an impeachment hearing. You know what I mean? Like you're going to have a bunch of people that claim compartmentalization immunizes them from being a part of this massive treasonous operation that we've just lived through for 10 years and are still living through, by the way.
Didn't we used to have this is really a tough topic to top out, but didn't we used to have like gallows in the town square?
January 6th, I'm still nervous about talking about gallows and going to the Capitol. I'm not saying what we do about it. I'm just saying I hope somebody does something about it, right?
Okay. Well, I know, but that's why it's a touchy subject. Nobody wants to talk about it.
This is Tinder for me because what they're talking about, they actually did. They accused us of doing in jest. Does that make sense? Like when you accuse Enrique Ontario of trying to overthrow the United States government, seditious conspiracy, and obtain a conviction and a 22-year sentence, you can't come over here to this USAID stuff and be like, oh, not only are you censoring the truth, you're funding the investigative journalists to determine the narrative, and that narrative is this treasonous narrative and is damaging to me. I went to prison because of this entrapment information laundering situation. Either the election was stolen or it wasn't. Either you were censoring the truth or you wasn't. But what now we know, but what was being printed was also under your control. So you're on both ends of the buy.
Yeah.
I always, it drove me crazy in prison when I talked to a drug dealer and they'd be like, so I was a druggie. I had a habit. I was basically, my neighborhood was out of copper pipes. I didn't have anything left to steal, anything left to sell, you know? And so my dealer's like, well, why don't you start, you know, slinging some hash for me or selling some dope and, you know, pay for your rehab. Well, so he buys some dope. Then it's all prepackaged. It's in a baggie. It's got all these little bags. Like, oh, sweet. I don't have to sit up all night and chop this up. Right. And so then he turns around. Someone calls him, says, hey, Fast Jim just called me to call you, said that you've got some dope. Oh, yeah, I do. Let's meet up behind the park and ride. And sells a bag of dopey, and next thing you know, cops are jumping out of the bushes, and he's got the feds are the guys who are selling the dope, right? The feds are the guys calling him saying he wants the dope, and he's in the middle. He's got feds on both ends. Yeah. Right? It's like, you need rehab. You don't need a fed encouraging you to be a dealer. You know what I'm saying? Setting you up. Well, it's the same thing. Like if you're providing the information through investigative journalism, but then you're censoring anything that's outside of that ecosystem, right? Like, you've set up a situation where if I believe in something that's not true, you've set that up. I can't trust Reuters. I can't trust Politico. I can't trust New York Times. I mean, let alone the fact that they've disappointed us so many times for the last 15 years, right? Like you just kind of figure out you can't trust them. But now it's like, oh, no, now I know why I can't trust them. I mean, you can't at all. So let's finish this here.
Entrusted with protecting our country are now undermining our own government.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're trying to do regime change, illegal, if you're weaponizing DHS, FBI, CISA, that's treasonous regime change activities redirected, you know, that you developed abroad, that we developed abroad for regime change, directed against the American people and our representatives. I mean, it's shocking, and we still haven't dealt with it as a country.
Mr. Schellenberger.
Okay. So now we're going to stay, same hearing, but now we're going to go listen to Jim Jordan's exchanges. So let me switch over here.
Mr. Taibbi, do you have any idea how many people work at the United States Department of Treasury?
Oh, I don't. I'm sorry.
108,376. And part of the Department of Treasury, of course, is the Internal Revenue Service. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, big part, frankly. Big part. Thousands of people work there, too. And on December 24th, 2022, one of those 108,376 employees at the Department of Treasury decided they were going to start an investigation into you. Is that right?
Yes, that's my understanding.
And that just happened to coincide with the day you did one of the Twitter files. I think one of the important ones. I think it may have been the second one, second or third, but one of those important Twitter files. Is that right?
Yes, there was.
And then a few months later, you're sitting in that same seat testifying in front of this committee, and the very time you're testifying, another one of those 108,376 people knock on your door. Unannounced visit to your home, which, by the way, they've discontinued because of this issue and a bunch of other crazy things they were doing. Is that right?
That's right, Mr. Chairman.
Just for the record, they actually owed you money, right? You didn't do anything wrong. Is that
They
accurate?
did. They owed me quite a lot of money.
Yeah, okay, I just want to make that clear. But obviously, a way to intimidate someone who is focusing on this issue.
So this is Matt Taibbi. He's one of the reporters that went through the Twitter files when Elon Musk bought Twitter.
Yeah.
And as he's doing this, the IRS comes to his house to start a review audit process. And through the process, turns out the IRS owes him money. So clearly, you know, it's targeted because they weren't actually looking for money.
They're just trying to keep him busy.
Yeah.
Issue we're discussing today, right?
Yes.
Now, we just got an order from a judge. The judge in the Southern District of New York said that no political appointees or special government employees can have access to information. 108,376 people can have access to information, but the people the President of the United States selects, the guy who was elected by 77 million people, he can't preliminary injunction against the defendants during the pendency of this from granting any political appointees, special government employees from any access to that information. I don't know about you, Mr. Schellenberg. I find that kind of troubling. 108,000 people can do it, at least one of them, Christmas Eve. We got a federal government employees working hard on Christmas Eve, probably remotely working, going after Mr. Taibbi. But the President of the United States can't have people go in and look and see if we can save some money for the taxpayers. He can't do that according to this judge. Think that makes sense, Mr. Schellenberger?
It doesn't. I mean, my understanding is that the president controls the executive branch and the executive branch
Article
agencies.
2, Section 1, very first sentence. Executive power shall be vested in the president, in a president.
I just realized I know the guy in the audience in this. Yeah.
Of the United States.
Like I said, I started, from the jail, started running in these circles.
No. We got to trust the bureau. This is the fundamental issue. You trust the unelected bureaucrats, I think it was Mr. Tiffany and Mr. McClintock, or do you trust the guy who was elected by the people? And that's where I would rather put our trust in the people who they put in office to do these kind of things. Now, you mentioned earlier, I'm going to jump around here and try to get to all of you. Mr. Schellenberger, you mentioned that USAID, which has been in the news of late, spending taxpayer money on all kinds of stupid things, is also involved in the censorship effort. And I want you to just elaborate on that a little bit, because this is going on as we speak. I want you to elaborate on that for the committee, if you would.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to understand that USAID viewed this very holistically. And it's important, if you look at the Hunter Biden laptop case, which is an extremely important case to understand, because the FBI was weaponized, then it weaponized the Aspen Institute to brainwash the entire media. It wasn't just that they censored it. It was that they changed the perception of the laptop. They created the perception that it was something other than what it obviously was. And that's what these guys are trying to do. These are called information operations. And USAID has been in the process of taking over so-called independent investigative journalism around the world, and at the same time then training NGOs how to demand.
This guy in the retribution shirt's name is Ivan.
Hey, Ivan, for example, Mr. Aaron's organization has been working to train organizations to so-called flag misinformation behind the scenes. By the way, it's one thing to criticize somebody publicly, which we should all be engaged in.
Yeah.
But this thing where you're skulking around,
you do that all the time.
Secretly, yeah, that's what open democracy is. This thing of going out and like secretly flagging information behind the scenes and demanding censorship, that's completely an abomination. That is not what
I just want to be clear. You're saying USAID, your investigation is now engaged in this pre-bunking kind of concept and process that they did with the laptop story in the fall of 2020.
And it's the exact same approach as well, where often what they're doing, for example, with USAID, OCCRP, is that they're leaking intelligence from the intelligence agencies.
Scary.
And not like WikiLeaks where they just dumped it, I think probably too much without the proper redactions, but they're strategically leaking it and then manipulating places like The Guardian and the New York Times to publish certain stories and control the whole investigative news process.
And we saw this from Yoel Roth's testimony. He testified during these weekly meetings that federal law enforcement communicated to us there was going to be hack and leak operations before the presidential election, likely in October. We had these, so that what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and then they said here who it's going to involve, that there were rumors that the hack and leak operation would involve Hunter Biden. So they set them all up. And then they set them all up because they had the laptop and they knew what was coming. And when it happens, everyone buys into what the 51 former intel officials say.
That's right.
Mr. Subramanian, I want to give you the last word. RFK, I just want you to appreciate the historical perspective you brought when you testified last Congress. But one of the statements that stuck with this last Congress was actually a statement made by RFK Jr. when he said, when you look at history, it is never the good guys who are for censorship. And that's what we're trying to keep in mind and stop it from both sides, from all sides. We want the First Amendment. I'll give you the last 30 seconds here to...
Absolutely. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, and when I was here the last time, I think it was a throwaway comment to a representative. It was not even part of my testimony. I don't think so. And I said, the values of Western civilization are worth fighting for, going back to the Enlightenment and the Reformation. That is what gave us free speech. That's what distinguishes us from the rest of the world. And the First Amendment in America distinguishes America from the rest of the world. I come from India originally. I live in Canada. I'm from Canada. But I've lived in India. I've lived in the Middle East. I've lived in places where just speaking your mind can send you to prison. You cannot criticize anything that goes against the government or certain religions for that matter. And when I came to the West, it was, refreshing to finally be able to express myself. And unfortunately, what I left behind has come to me in Canada, has followed me to Canada. And I'm seeing that happening in the United States. And it's very worrying because it's happened so quickly, and I don't know where this is going to lead us to.
Yeah. If we can't settle our disputes with debate, the alternative is frightening, and we never want.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
And I wanted to remind you of this here. This is when I was flying. This is when I was flying to DC for January 6th. So for whatever reason, I didn't get the image didn't capture, but this is the audio of the lady I was sitting next to on the plane going to January 6th.
Okay.
Sitting next to, I don't even know her name. What's your name?
Sandy.
Sandy's from Taiwan. Tell us what you just said.
I will be there in DC until the 20th. If nothing gets settled, I will use my body to protect the White House.
She's saying she's going to stay in D.C. till the 20th. She's going to use her body to protect the White House.
Until my last drop.
Until her she's putting it all in here.
Drop, my blood.
She's from Taiwan. She knows what communism does. She's not going to let it happen.
My father suffered from this one in 1949. The government had retreated to Taiwan, and my grandpa died trying to escape from communism. So I know what's going to happen.
That's why I'm on a plane. That's why she's here. That's why she's here. That's why we're all here.
Yeah, we're all here.
So that was just the person I sat next to going to January 6th.
Did they play that clip in your...
No.
Oh.
But they didn't play it. They were pretty... We'll talk about that many more times.
Okay.
Right now. I don't want to go on that tangent. But knowing what time it is, right? So we just dedicated quite a bit of time to listening to this committee hearing that Jim Jordan was overseeing about USAID and how they've taken over investigative journalism and how they're also running censorship operations. So if it's not in line with what they're promoting through the journalists, then you get censored, right? Our narrative, not your narrative. Like, this is a giant information brainwashing operation that we have all been subject to.
Yeah, and if you're a journalist that's being told what to say in your report, you're not a journalist anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
But see, the thing is if you go isolate one of these journalists, and this is where I fear like the compartmentalization of all of this, where people don't know where their money's coming from. Does that make sense? Like you're a journalist, an investigative journalist, and you're just doing your thing. You've drank the Kool-Aid. You're never going to know that you're part of this. Hey, Trump's bad. You've got Trump derangement syndrome. You're update on your boosters. You're good.
Yeah,
right?
But when your copy editor goes, well, we need you to change some words in your latest article.
Well, this is where something like Amy Robach, I think, at ABC got the Epstein story. And then she's like, we were all ready to go. We had interviews and victims and blah, blah, blah. And then it got killed.
Yeah.
So she's like, I don't know why they did that. It was Disney, and The Crown and whatever. But that's like, a lot of journalists could go through their whole career and never cross the line where they know they're being censored or they know they're a part of it. And that's where I think a lot of people are like, we don't know what they have on us. Like, if you're a journalist at Politico, you might be engaged in good faith, but you're getting paid by USAID, who is using you through Politico to launder information into the zeitgeist. You see what I'm saying? So it's like, well, do they have anything on me? Well, I don't know. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, are you a real believer, or do you know you've been lying? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there in media that are like, well, I know I've been lying. I have a problem. You know what I mean? Then you've got a lot of politicians that are like, I know money comes back to my family through these small NGOs studying quail in Serbia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's like, well, what do they have on us? And it's interesting to me. So this next clip is Lindsey Graham, who I really have grown to kind of like despise. And this is kind of why. So Samantha Powers was just running USAID, and she's a huge Obama acolyte, and she's a mess, right? Like, Samantha Powers' name's on it. Bad news bears. Okay. So pick up on what Lindsey Graham says about Samantha Powers.
Have you spoken to President Trump about USAID, and what do you think about the way that agency has been dismantled without much notice, the ability to plan around the world?
Well, USAID under scrutiny did poorly. I have been a big advocate for soft power. I'm a pretty hawkish guy, but I've been in charge of the 150 account, state foreign ops account, making sure the State Department is funded. To the men and women of the State Department, you're warriors in your own way. You serve in very dangerous places. I want you to have secure embassies and secure consulates. You represent the best of America. USAID is an agency that let us all down. I've been advocating for soft power for my entire time up here. And what I have seen makes me sick to my stomach. I am for helping starving people. I am for clean water. I am for making sure that we have ability to combat China and Africa, that we show up with the best of America. But Samantha Powers has been just texting me morning, noon, and night. Samantha, look in the mirror.
Did you hear that?
The reason USAID is going to cease to exist as it did before is because it should. I can't go home and say, this is soft power. Operas, whatever agenda you got, needs to be focused on making America safer and prosperous for working with people. So USAID is a victim of their own existence.
A victim of their own existence. Now,
he sounds like he's testifying.
Lindsey Graham is an old bull, right?
Yeah.
He's when he moves, other senators move with him. Right. And he's got a lot of money in PACs and stuff like that. So the fact that Samantha Powers is reaching out to him morning, noon, and night, right? Which, you have a communication channel with Samantha Powers.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah. The whole thing was, he sounded like he was trying to put on a defense, and he was testifying.
What he's doing is he's setting the stage for the other Republicans to follow suit. Look, don't step in and defend USAID.
Yeah.
Like, even if you've got a little dog in that fight, it's a chihuahua compared to when you start digging into the Clinton and others, Soros getting $270 million through his various NGOs that he's dumping back into American politics.
Yeah.
Right.
Like he doesn't have enough money.
I'm making a prediction right now, but this Act Blue investigation going on in Texas is going to collide with USAID. You're going to find out a lot of money was going through these NGOs and then was funneling back through into USAID. I'm making the prediction now. But, USAID's got to go. So Doge has been attacking a lot of things, not just USAID. That's obviously causing all the shrieking. What do you have on us? Clearly, everything about USAID is pretty much going to be corrupt. Everything about it. But Doge has also gotten into, and this comes from Yahoo News Insider, another funded group, I'm sure. Department of Education, all the DE&I initiatives throughout the government, U.S. Agency of International Development, that's USAID, the Federal Workforce, the Federal Aviation Administration, the Treasury Department, Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, Consumer Finance Protection Bureau are the ones that he's been able to jump into now. So there's stuff going on at all of those. And here's one, too. This is the EPA. So when we're talking about our government, remember, there's this narrative, right? They're like, these kids are young and they're coming into these government agencies and they've got access to our data and we don't know what they have, right? And you've got all this stuff going on and you've got senators and congressmen not sure if they should defend the government and USAID or stay on the Trump train and ride this populist wave. Like, there's a lot. You can see the tempest here. Everybody's trying to take the water temperature. Well, one of the things so far, I'm really happy with what I'm seeing in the administration. So a couple months ago, Project Veritas, if you remember them, they did an undercover video with the EPA. And this is Brent Efron from the Environmental Service Protection Agency. And he's simply an special advisor for implementation. Now, when you look at him here, the guy's not very old. He's pretty young. He's under 30, right around there. But listen to how he talks about money and what's going on. And this is another one of those undercover date sting videos. They're great.
Now we're just having to get the money out as fast as possible before they come in and
So he's talking about the EPA getting money out before Trump comes in.
It truly feels like we're on the Titanic or throwing gold bars off the top hatch.
Okay. This is a government worker.
What?
Again.
That's a weird thing to say.
This is a government worker working inside the EPA who is saying it feels like we're throwing gold bars off the edge of the Titanic.
Right.
So when you're thinking accountability, is this money going to go to do anything? This guy's openly admitting we're hucking gold off the bow of the ship.
Yeah.
You're not tracking this stuff.
Where are the gold bars going to? nonprofits, states, tribes. We gave them the money because it was harder. If it was a government-run program, they could take the money away. If Trump won, and because it was a insurance policy against Trump winning.
Okay. So here we'll just
Until the Trump people come in and tell us we can no longer give up money. I do environmental, climate, policy.
Okay, so he goes on for quite a bit longer talking about what he does and blah, blah, blah. But you just heard like this open, easy admission, right? Now, in the past, this kind of stuff would kind of go like, here's this big problem. And for a few of us peasants, we would remember, but we'd never see like a resolution. Well, this is Lee Zeldin, who just got confirmed as head of the EPA. And this is where I feel like we're starting to see the rubber hit the road. We're starting to see where you got the exposure and you're going to start to have the resolution because they're playing on the same team. You know what I mean? Instead of having the government on two ends of the buy, now you finally got the good guys on both ends of the buy. You know what I mean? You got the good guys. So here's Lee Zeldin talking about just those gold bars.
Hi, this is EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. One of my very top priorities at EPA is to be an excellent steward of your hard-earned time.
The video did something funny.
Probably have to refresh. And you're gonna
Sorry, guys.
You're gonna lose your place. There you go.
This is EPA Administrator Lee Zeldin. One of my very top priorities at EPA is to be an excellent steward of your hard-earned tax dollars. There will be zero tolerance of any waste and abuse. An extremely disturbing video circulated 2 months ago featuring a Biden EPA political appointee talking about how they were tossing gold bars off the Titanic, rushing to get billions of your tax dollars out the door before Inauguration Day. The gold bars were tax dollars, and tossing them off the Titanic meant the Biden administration knew they were wasting it. Following this revelation, during my meetings with members of Congress, I made a very important commitment to them and to the American people, which I reiterated at my confirmation hearing that if confirmed, I would immediately get a full accounting. Fortunately, my awesome team at EPA has found the gold bars. Shockingly, roughly $20 billion of your tax dollars were parked at an outside financial institution by the Biden EPA. This scheme was the first of its kind in EPA history, and it was purposefully designed to obligate all of the money in a rush job with reduced oversight. Even further, this pot of $20 billion was awarded to just 8 entities that were then responsible for doling out your money to NGOs and others at their discretion with far less transparency. Just under $7 billion was sent to one entity called the Climate United Fund. I'm sure you and I now have some of the same questions. How do these organizations decide how to allocate funding? How much money have they given out so far and to whom? Are there any former Biden EPA staffers who are now working at these entities? Let me make one thing abundantly clear. At this point, there is zero reason to suspect any wrongdoing by the bank. Here's my position as EPA Administrator. The financial agent agreement with the bank needs to be instantly terminated, and the bank must immediately return all of the gold bars that the Biden administration tossed off the Titanic.
Stole.
EPA needs to reassume responsibility for all of these funds. We will review every penny that has gone out the door. I will be referring this matter to the Inspector General's office, and will work with the Justice Department as well. The days of irresponsibly shoveling boatloads of cash to far-left activist groups in the name of environmental justice and climate equity are over. The American public deserves an accountable government than what transpired these past 4 years. We take our obligations under the law as seriously as it gets. I directed my team to find your gold bars, and they found them. Now we will get them back inside of control of government as we pursue next steps. As President Trump has vowed, We're going to usher in a new golden age of American success for the citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed.
So one thing I really like about everything that the administration is doing right now is they're kind of playing on the same sheet of music. Like they actually support Trump and his agenda.
Yeah.
It's kind of nice. It's really weird. So they did that. Like he says, it's the first ever scheme. And this kind of goes, well, who was running the place? Right? Like
that's what I want to know.
And what was their objective? Do you remember? I don't remember her name. She's the lady that worked on the Harris campaign as a high-level staffer. She's very close with the Bidens. Played a couple of her videos. Asian lady. Okay, well, she was on with Glenn Beck. And he's asking her specifically who was running the country. Okay, so here was her answer.
President was. Who was the president in the last 4 years?
Glenn, the thing is, there were like 10 of them. Because you have like Steve Ricchetti and Mike Donilon and Nita Dunn and Barack Obama orbiting around and all these people who were unelected senior advisors running the show. It certainly wasn't Joe Biden. He was just a figurehead signing the executive orders, not really understanding what he was signing. And it's just a very, very grave situation that I tried to flag for everybody for a number of years now. It took me a while to get here, though. You know, they will excoriate you, and I'm still paying the price. Glenn, it's been really hard time for me. I haven't slept. I didn't sleep last night. I've been having trouble sleeping. I'm being attacked from both the left and the right, by the way. Somebody on the right is trying to defame me, and the left is just insane. So it's not it's not easy, Glenn.
Jeez.
I think it's funny. She's like, they're attacking me. It's like, oh, girl. Well, I don't know if you've been around for a little while, but some of us know what it's like to be attacked.
Yeah. I heard her speaking. I don't know her name either, but I heard her speaking with somebody else, and she mentioned under the same question of who was in charge, she said Jill Biden.
She was president. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So who concocted the $20 billion scheme?
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like she said the Bidens were just so corrupt. I can't even think he remembered some of the corruption. I was like, you worked for this guy. You tried to get him reelected.
Yeah.
Like, do you
you didn't know
I'm
what was
glad you're
gonna
having a
happen?
hard time sleeping. This is called cognitive dissonance. You're now waking up to the wasted life that you've lived. You know what I mean? Like you just realize that you're just a criminal. You're just a petty criminal. You just didn't know where you fit in the scheme of things. Like you just realized that you were closing the train cars on the way to Auschwitz.
Yeah.
You know, they're not being relocated to a new family
she's become
homestead.
a whistleblower, you know, because she knows where the train's going.
That's the thing, you know, but
everybody's trying to figure out how to get off the Titanic.
Well, some of these people, like, she's not going to be trusted again in Democratic circles.
No.
And she's never going to convert to an ideological Republican. So she's done. Like, which is fine. You should be done. And you should be telling all on your way out the door because it was horrible what you participated in. But, you know, I've been trying to raise this issue for the last 4 years. Oh, that we didn't have a country? That we didn't have a leader? That Jake Sullivan was running the show? You know, it's like that Jill Biden was actually in charge? Like, what? Okay. And I wanted to bring this up. So this is one of my friends, Daniel Ball. So I met Daniel Ball in the D.C. prison, or the D.C. gulag, whatever you want to call it. He's a great guy. He's a really calm person, ex-Navy military kind of thing. Well, bottom line is he had a felony earlier in his life, so he wasn't allowed to possess a gun. When he got indicted for January 6th, when they raided his house, his brother had a .22 and ammunition in the home. So because it was, you know, in the home he was in, they've construed it to him as being felon in possession with a gun. So when we got all of our pardons, he was one of the people that wasn't allowed to get back out. Well, he finally got transferred a couple places down to Florida, and the judge in his gun case has now let him home on home confinement. And he has a special needs son. And I just want to show this video of him meeting his special needs son for the first time, and it's got to be going on 3 years now. When I see this video, there's not a lot of sound there, but just knowing Daniel, seeing him hug his son, who's, you know, where's my dad? He's on the spectrum. And this video kind of buffered too. There's nothing super special about it. But when we're talking in the context of, like, you know, USAID, billions of dollars, who's running the country, this is why it matters. because those people that were not running the country, that were elected and accountable, their subordinates put guys like him in jail for 3 years, kept him from his son. His story, you know, basically he had an explosives ordinance charge for the Capitol that day because he's standing in the crowd. Somebody puts a firecracker in his hand. He looks at the firecracker, hand reaches out, lights it. What do you do with a lit firecracker?
You don't hold on to it.
So he throws it, you know, over the crowd, over the police line, and he gets an explosive ordinance attempted, you know, weapon of mass destruction charge or whatever for this firecracker. Doesn't know who handed it to him, doesn't know who lit it, right? And they turned that into a 10-year mandatory minimum, incarcerated him, right? And now he still has to go through more fallout from this, but he's been kept from his son for all this time. So when we're talking about the consequences of this stuff, there's a direct line from these people that run the country into our house. And we've invited them with things like cell phones and banking and, you know, all that kind of stuff. But we really need to know what time it is, right? Like, I hate to be, when I was in jail, I'm going to do it all the time, but it's like, this is real. It's really real. Yesterday morning, I started telling this story yesterday, but yesterday morning we were laying in bed. My wife was like, oh, should we move out of Washington? And I'm like, why? She's like, oh, I'm just afraid of being targeted. And I'm like, I just got a presidential pardon. You know, I just want to take a break for a minute. Like, and I'm laying there in bed and I'm thinking, this is what the Jewish families in Nazi Germany were thinking in the 1930s. Should we move? You know, like, it's getting kind of harder to do business. It's getting kind of harder to just get by. And I kind of feel like the news is turning against us. And you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they don't appreciate our banking anymore. And they don't appreciate our little cheese shops or whatever. Like, the neighborhood's changing, you know? And it's when my wife's like, should we move? I'm afraid of being targeted. And I'm just like, I just got done with my own federal government targeting me. Now I'm worried about my state targeting me. What am I doing? But when you hear these person testifying or the woman from Taiwan, like, you need to know what time it is. Like, yes, you could be put in jail for something you said that's anti-government. They can construe any action you have and then create a criminal motivation behind it by stupid things you've said online over the last few years, right? Like, it really is a scary time we've just come through. And I'm going to talk about it as if we've gotten through it, even though we really still have a lot of work left to do, for sure, because all the tools are still there. And that's what we have to be as peasants. We have to go, hey, those tools will eventually be used against us. You know, at some point, it's going to come back at us. When you invent a new weapon, eventually your enemy gets that weapon, right? How great would it be if only the United States had centerfire rifles?
Yeah.
Oh, no. But eventually the Indians get them. And now it's not bows and arrows versus rifles. It's rifles versus rifles. You know what I mean? Eventually your enemies are flying F-16s. You know, like, it's
or
just a matter of time. Yeah. Now everybody's got nukes. So we have to be like, hey, when we make these tools, they can get used against us. If that's a possibility, we have to go into it eyes wide open. We have to. And we also have to understand that our rights, we have to defend them. They're not given to us. We own them. They are unalienable. They cannot be given to us. We have to impose them upon the forces that are trying to take them from us. And anyways, that's just my thought on that. Like, when I saw that video of Daniel Ball, I was like, man, it's very real. So this is Benny talking to Mike Davis. Mike Davis has kind of been he used to work clerk for Gorsuch and stuff like that, but he's real big on picking judges, and he runs the Article 3 project. Anyways, he was talking about this, about prosecutors, but specifically Letitia James, trying to turn around and continue to come after Trump. If you remember yesterday, Steve Bannon said Letitia James and Alvin Bragg were the existential threat to the Trump administration. Well, this was Mike Davis's warning to them.
Let me just say this to Big Tish James, the New York Attorney General. I dare you to try to continue your lawfare against President Trump in his second term, because listen here, sweetheart, we're not messing around this time, and we will put your fat ass in prison for conspiracy against rights. And I promise you that. So think long and hard before you want to violate President Trump's constitutional rights or any other American's constitutional rights. It's not going to happen again.
We've been warning people on the show, Mike, this isn't the same Trump administration. Stop messing around. Don't rig elections. Don't illegally vote. Don't try the funny business, because we know the team.
Don't try the funny business, because we know. And in fulfillment of that, yesterday, in Pam Bondi's, I think, first full day in office, did just that.
We're here today because we have filed charges against the state of New York. We have filed charges against Kathy Hochul. We have filed charges against Letitia James and Mark Schroeder, who is with DMV. This is a new DOJ, and we are taking steps to protect Americans, American citizens, and angel moms, like the mom standing right behind me, who you're going to hear from in a moment. New York has chosen to prioritize illegal aliens over American citizens. It stops today.
So they filed lawsuit against New York and Letitia James over blocking the immigration, right? ICE from coming in and doing their job. But this is the first time in ever that it feels like you're on the front foot instead of on defense all the time.
Heels.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like they're on the front foot. So we'll be following that. That'll be dragging out through the courts for a while. And yesterday also Tulsi Gabbard was confirmed. And this is at Tulsi Gabbard's confirmation hearing. This was her little speech. And I want to play these things because remember, we're going to start to see these come up over and over, and we want to follow it through as peasants. We want to hold accountable this process, but we got to read the clock. We got to know if these problems get fixed. It's one thing to know, hey, Operation Mockingbird, the government's in the news media. Okay, great. Are you going to fix it? Okay, government's funding investigative journalism. Okay, I want to see the clawback. You know what I mean? Like we've got to see it through. Otherwise, we're just patsies in all of this.
The American people elected Donald Trump as their president not once but twice. And yet the FBI and intelligence agencies were politicized by his opponents to undermine his presidency and falsely portray him as a puppet of Putin. Title I of FISA was used illegally to obtain a warrant to spy on Trump campaign advisor Carter Page, using a Clinton campaign-funded false dossier as their so-called evidence. Biden campaign advisor Tony Blinken was the impetus for the 51 former senior intelligence officials' letter dismissing Hunter Biden's laptop.
Okay, so Tony Blinken was the Secretary of State for the last 4 years. He instigated the letter of the 51 intelligence officers, who, by the way, were all on payroll, to say that the Biden laptop was the hallmarks of Russian disinformation, which at the very lowest level, low-hanging fruit, was rigging the 2020 election. Lowest hanging fruit.
Yeah.
As disinformation.
And then that guy went on to serve for 4 years as Secretary of State, and we were all supposed to take him serious.
Right.
Specifically to help Biden win the election. Former DNI James Clapper lied to this committee in 2013, denying the existence of programs that facilitated the mass collection of millions of Americans' phone and internet records, yet was never held accountable. Under John Brennan's leadership, the CIA abused its power to spy on Congress, to dodge oversight, lied about doing it until he was caught, and yet has never been held responsible. Under Biden, the FBI abused its power for political reasons to try to surveil Catholics who attend traditional Latin Mass, labeling them as quote-unquote radical traditionalist Catholics. Personally, just 24 hours after I criticized Kamala Harris and her nomination, I was placed on a secret domestic terror watch list called Quiet Skies. Sadly, there are more examples. The bottom line is this must end.
So for the first time in American history, we have a director of national intelligence that knows what's up, that was targeted by the intelligence agency itself. You know what I mean?
Put on a no-fly list.
This is crazy. The same no-fly list I was on or am on, right? So to me, when I'm like, the peasants are now running the place, it's like, yeah, these, RFK, who was confirmed, Tulsi Gabbard, a lot of these cabinet picks that Trump has picked are the kind of people that are like coming in like us. They want to come and clean things up, make it run right. They believe in the ideals of America. They no longer recognize that in the nation of America. I found this and I thought it was kind of funny. So Kurt Cobain, 1993, he said this. He says, in the end, I believe my generation will surprise everyone. We already know that both political parties are playing both sides from the middle and will elect a true outsider when we fully mature. I wouldn't be surprised if it's not a business tycoon who can't be bought and who does what's right for the people. Someone like Donald Trump, as crazy as that sounds.
Whoa.
That was in 1993. And I saw this other little meme thing, and it says, hey, Democrats. And again, this is, we as peasants, this is kind of like what we have to hold on to too, because our story interacts with this in so many ways. Because if they did it to him, it's because they could do it to us. That's the real message here. It's not they're trying to get to us through him. It's they've used us and violating our rights with such repetition that they could get to him. Hey, Democrats, if you haven't illegally spied on Trump, undermined Trump's presidency, stole the 2020 election, arrested Trump, charged Trump, indicted Trump, gagged Trump, censored Trump, raided Trump's private residence, jailed Trump's supporters, attempted to remove Trump from state ballots, convicted Trump, and tried to kill Trump, none of this would be happening, but you around, and now you're finding out. The American people. And then I don't know if you remember this from the old Q days, constantly the perp walk, but I wanted to finish up with this because just maybe it's finally possible. Oh no.
Refresh.
Oh no. Oh, this is the old video where Trump and his team walk out Hillary Clinton. You hear the sound? This used to be like Bill Barr and Chris Ray, and it's like over the years it's changed. When I saw this today, I started laughing so hard. I'm like, this meme has teased us for 10 years. Anyways, hey guys, you can find me on Twitter at Gone for Months. You can help my family and myself reset after coming out of 14 months of incarceration at givesendgo.com and just search my name, Taylor Johnatakis. It's Johnatakis. And you'll see one there. It's Taylor, or TJ6 is my Give Send Go. You can also visit our website, peasantsperspective.com, leftbehindandwithout.org. And that's all I can think of for the moment. So don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and please, 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 please share this podcast with somebody. Let's help this thing grow, and we'll get the party started. Talk to you later. Bye.